Welcome to the Contagious Code Podcast, where we dive deep into code, learn practical skills, celebrate the beauty of engineering, and eliminate imposter syndrome. I'm Tejas Kumar, and I've been building on the web for over 20 years at places like Vercel, Spotify, Zeta, and more. Today on the podcast, we're going to talk about developer relations, or what some know it as DevRel. This is a nuanced discussion. It's a deep dive on what DevRel is, how to do it right, how to measure it, does it even make sense? And a lot of it is inspired not by me, but by experts on the internet. Every citation you need is in the show notes below. This episode is something of a happy accident, because this was supposed to be a discussion with Rizel Scarlett, who's working on Goose, an autonomous open source AI agent. But Rizel has just had a beautiful little baby, and unfortunately we couldn't record because of mom responsibilities, which is a great reason, and it's so good to see Rizel prioritizing her family. So if you enjoy this episode, thank Rizel. In any case, we have some time together to talk about DevRel, what resonates with developers, what doesn't, how it works, and so on. At the end of the episode, we'll have a recording of an actual Q&A workshop that I was able to do with the DevRel community in Africa, led by Kenny. Some of you may know him as Kenny, Izzy, and others. So that's at the end of the episode. But before we begin, I'd like to emphasize that this is separate to my day job, and the way we can make this free and possible for everybody is to thank our sponsors and partners. The Contagious Code Podcast is partnered with Code Crafters. Code Crafters is a great way to level up your coding skills by hitting you from both sides. They help you get better at a programming language and a tool. So you pick a programming language like Rust, Julia, JavaScript, and you pick a tool, Git, Redis, Docker, and they have you build the tool from scratch in the programming language that you choose. By doing so, you get better at both the tool and the language. They have a generous free tier, but if you want to start paying, there's a pretty big discount in the show notes that you can just also follow the link tej.as/codecrafters. If you're looking to partner with or sponsor the podcast, please do reach out. The website is tej.as, or you can find me on X. There are links in the show notes. Thanks. And now here's the episode on developer relations. To start with, let's just talk about DevRel. I think the main thesis of DevRel is the idea that developers have become key decision makers in technology adoption. Let me say that again. Developers have become key decision makers in technology adoption. What DevRel ultimately unlocks is if you make a product that resonates with developers, then developers lead its adoption in their companies. Think of the engineers at Netflix, at Microsoft, Google. If you make a developer tool, something like Clerk for authentication, which can give them great developer experience, but also really awesome guarantees around security and compliance in the enterprise, then what's going to happen is developers are going to love the tool. They're going to go to their decision makers at wherever they work, and they're going to say, hey, we need to adopt this thing. This is bottoms up adoption as opposed to top down adoption, where decision makers and C whatever O's go to their team and says, hey, use this tool because we have to, right? And so developers using maybe it's not so human, but leveraging developers as key decision makers in technology adoption is one of the critical functions of developer relations. In our time together today, we're going to cover the definition of DevRel. We're going to talk about its history, its role in organizations, how to measure it, and we'll outline some best practices for high impact DevRel initiatives. Again, this is not my imagination. This is not anecdata. There's tons of hard data on this from sources like literally developerrelations.com, from leaders like Sean Swick-Swang and others. All of this, again, is in the show notes, okay? This episode is for all backgrounds, technical and non-technical, and ideally demystifies the value of DevRel or developer relations, okay? So let's start by talking about what is developer relations. And what I want to do is talk about the history of developer relations. Developer relations is the practice of building mutually beneficial relationships with software developers on behalf of a company. Okay, that's like the most Wikipedia definition you can get. I'll say that again. It's a practice of building mutually beneficial relationships with developers on behalf of a company. In business, companies have this personhood. Yeah, when you incorporate a business, in corpo, that's literally like give it a body. And so there's this idea that businesses are people. They're the product of a bunch of people, but they also function as people. And so DevRel is bridging the gap from regular software developers who are individual people to either your company, actually definitely your company, which then makes products. I think a great example is I work in DevRel at DataStax, now IBM. And my job is to help software developers have a great relationship with my company, with IBM, with the product, and so on. In essence, it's this like two-way bridge. You help external developers succeed with your product, and you bring their needs and feedback back into the company. And that's from, again, everything is linked here in the show notes. This is from developerrelations.com, where this is the idea, right? You help them succeed with the product, and then they give you feedback. Oh no, this thing doesn't work. And then you take the feedback into your company and say, hey, we're hearing this from a bunch. This literally happened recently where I shared some issues. I think, if you want to get really specific, I noticed. So I work on Langflow. It's a great tool. It's actually one of the best ways to build AI agents. We'll have a link in the show notes to that as well. I work with Langflow. I'm one of the developer relations engineers on Langflow, and I had some feedback where components are just missing. And I thought, this is strange. Shared it with the team. We did a hackathon some days later, and a number of folks also, developers, also at the hackathon, were like, "Hey, this is not helpful. Or some components are missing." So it was my feedback, then compounded with the feedback of external developers. We brought this back to the team, and we decided, in fact, now we're investigating a fix. That's DevRel. That's classic DevRel. However, there's a difference. There's nuance here, because there's dev in DevRel, right? If we liken DevRel to something like customer relations, think about like customer relations. Apple makes, of course, the iPhone. The iPhone has customers, and some iPhone customers are developers, but other iPhone customers are people like my parents who are not developers, right? They just have iPhones. Customer relations is almost like the broader set of DevRel, where in customer relations, you care a lot about the company's relationship with customers. Things like customer support, things like warranties, things like whatever, incentives programs. All of those customer support functions, all of those customer relations functions are almost like a superset of DevRel. DevRel is the things you do, the operations you as a company do to foster great relationships with developers. Why am I spending so much time on this distinction? I'm spending so much time on this distinction because oftentimes developer relations is seen as a function of marketing. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. It can hurt an organization sometimes. We'll talk about this, but usually people think, okay, DevRel, okay, marketing. It's important to draw this distinction between DevRel and traditional marketing because developers operate by completely different norms. Like, have you talked to a developer? If you have, you'll know what I mean. Have you worked with a developer? If you have, you will know what I mean. There's just different norms, right? We as developers don't operate like the rest of the world. Like, even with communication sometimes, it can be tricky. Developers, though, like everybody else, we value authenticity, just like regular people. Not to say we're not regular, you get the idea. But I think something that developers value maybe a little bit more than regular customers is technical depth. Not technical depth, not debt, but technical depth, where developers really want to know, hey, how is this built? Like, what's going on inside? Like, we want to, like, here's an example with engineers versus consumers. An automobile engineer would enjoy a car based on how the car is built. They will literally ask you, hey, pop the hood. I want to look inside. I want to look at that beautiful V6 engine. I want to look at all the cylinders. Is it a stick shift or is it automatic? I want to, right? The automobile engineers really want to get to that level, and they appreciate the technical depth. So if you want to sell a car to automobile engineers, you want to tell them, hey, this is a great V12 bi-turbo, whatever. It's the same with DevRel, right? They care about that. So if you say, hey, this product is great, it's a car, you can drive it, it's got wheels, it's great for 8 children in the back. If you're a soccer mom, the developers are not gonna, unless that soccer mom is a developer, you get the idea. Developers care way more about technical details than regular marketing, then certainly more than sales pitches, right? If you're pitching a developer using business terms and sales, you've lost. I will say Steve Jobs was a master of this. Not so much DevRel, but customer relations, right? Like in his era of Apple, they never said we have 18 high efficiency cores and 20 performance cores or whatever it is that they say nowadays in the keynotes. There's nobody cares about how much RAM you have or what overclocked CPU, whatever. Can I run AutoCAD? Does it play Crisis, right? Speak the language. And DevRel has to do this as well. You have to know who you're talking to and talk to them about what they care about. Nobody cares, if we're talking about mass market consumers, that the iPhone has like 4 core, whatever, right? They want to know, is it going to last a whole day? You know? So DevRel is similar to that. Traditional marketing tactics, that's what we just talked about, don't work with developers, right? DevRel even became a thing. It emerged to engage developers on their own terms, on our own terms. Like code, show me the code. What does Linus Torvald say? I talk is cheap, show me the code. We want to meet developers where they are, usually with DevRel. That's code, community, that's meetups and things where people can just talk like about technical detail, and education. Like, hey, here's how you like what's his name? Brahmas Van Dam from Chrome DevRel. Great talks he's been doing about how you can do scroll-driven animations. Literally just like hands-on. That's what they want. DevRel also has many names. I think this is worth mentioning. There's developer advocates, there's developer evangelism, there's community management. A lot of these are somewhat interchangeable because they all have a similar goal. And that goal is you just want a vibrant developer ecosystem around some type of technology. In a way, it's none of these and all of these. It's a blend of marketing, engineering, product, and community functions. And we'll get to this later, but where DevRel often goes wrong is where it over biases in one direction or another, right? DevRel can bias too heavily in the direction of marketing, where it's all you're talking about is like, hey, am I hitting numbers? At this point, you're just like a lead generation machine. Similarly, DevRel can bias way too heavily towards engineering, where you can't tell, is this person doing DevRel or are they just another individual contributor contributing code? And that's another point where we get lost, okay? So how you balance DevRel is going to come back when we dive in and discuss, and it's going to have significant impact. Okay. Before we move further, I'd love to talk about the history of DevRel. I think this is very interesting. Where did DevRel come from, and where is it today? DevRel started in the 1980s, believe it or not, before I was born. And to, I think, almost no one's surprise, the company that invented DevRel is Apple. Apple launched one of the first, if not the first, DevRel programs in the entire world in the 1980s. It was Mike Murray, who worked at Apple, who coined the term software evangelist. And that's exactly what it sounds like. You recruit third-party developers to the Macintosh. From this program, some of you may know the name Guy Kawasaki, became Apple's chief evangelist. That's an actual title, chief evangelist, which it's a C-level role. And he really heavily popularized, developer evangelism. By the late 1990s, Microsoft had a formal, developer relations group that was focused on helping independent software vendors build on Windows. Again, this was the first ever like DevRel thing we've ever seen. And this was in 1997. I was 4 years old, where Microsoft decided, okay, we're going to create a group of developer relations people. And the main job, the main mandate is you're going to help independent software companies build on Windows. You're going to essentially seed the ecosystem. This is the reason we have Windows apps. This is the reason Windows was so popular, DevRel, believe it or not. I think what's so profound about this is the way they measured DevRel back then. The way they measured success for DevRel with this like Windows DevRel group in 97 was they literally looked at how many apps did these people produce. How many apps do these people, and there's so much food for thought here, because say you work in DevRel today or you're interested. I have worked in DevRel since 2017, 2018, something there. It's been 7 or 8 years now. And it's very interesting because we don't usually consider this as metrics. Let's use, for example, say a popular database company. Let's say you're doing DevRel at planet scale. I'd love to know, is this your main KPI? Is this your main key performance indicator? Is this your main measure of success? Like, how many people are building apps where their application, excuse me, where the database is planet scale? Does that make sense? How many people are, because they had one number. They're like, how many people are building Windows apps? Or rather, how many Windows apps are our people, our community building? If that number doesn't work, then the function is broken. That's it. Which, if we compare that to today's DevRel, I would wager, this is anecdata, I don't have sources for this, but I would wager that a lot of today's DevRel is around marketing and lead gen, right? How many attendees to your talk at a conference? How many people signed up for your meetup? How many came to your webinar? These are marketing KPIs. These have nothing to do with are people actually building with your thing. And I think that's definitely worth thinking about. But from there, DevRel proved that the success of a platform, in this case Windows, hinges not on how great the platform is, but on external developers. That's why DevRel became such a thing. From there, if we fast forward now to the 2000s, so that's 1980, 1990. 97 was when this group came up. In the early 2000s, let's say 2000s to 2010, many startups, they just had DevRel as a first-class citizen. I think Twilio has done a great job for this. But if we name a few, Twilio, SendGrid, which is now part of Twilio, New Relic, and EngineYard, these companies became super famous for their developer evangelism and community presence. For example, Twilio, they had this like ask your developer billboard campaign all the way back in 2015, and it showed how developers drive business innovation. Ask your developer. Some of you, leave a comment if you remember this. This was huge because this is one of the first times that the developer was seen as like a decision maker in a way. These companies, again, that's Twilio and SendGrid and all these, they show that when you have a valuable developer community, you can really take a product and make it a product leader, even a category leader. This is Twilio's ultimate claim to fame. This is also why I happily work at DataStax. My manager, we call them coaches, but my manager at DataStax was formerly the head of developer relations at Twilio, one of the best DevRel programs in the whole world. One of my teammates, Phil Nash, was a developer advocate at Twilio. And so it's just an honor and a privilege to get to work with these kinds of people to help out and serve the DevRel function of DataStax, IBM, my current employer. And so just a little aside for you. But this was kind of like between 2000, 2010, 2015, etc. Twilio, SendGrid, New Relic, EngineYard, these companies really drove early DevRel, and they proved the point. They proved that when people build on your platform, ultimately the developer is worth investing in. By the 2020s, I was well established in DevRel at this point. It became just a really broad, and this is where I think DevRel started to go wrong, frankly. It became a very broad discipline, and it got all kinds of heads. So there's community building, there's developer experience work, and this could be SDKs and APIs, or it could be like, hey, if you need support, like, is someone going to come talk to you? Content creation, so the rise of like blogs and influencers and things like that. It just broadened a lot by the 2020s, to the point where nowadays, like, so many companies have formal developer programs or DevRel teams. There's also conferences about DevRel, right? Like DevRel Con was one of them. And so modern DevRel is really not even limited to tech startups, like banks, car companies, enterprise B2B. A bunch of them invest in developer communities because software is central to all industries. As A16Z or Andreessen Horowitz, the great investment firm, puts it, software is eating the world. Software is eating the world. And so if we consider sort of the value of all of this, of DevRel in modern tech, we've drawn the line, the historical line from 1980 to today. Where does the value land? Well, today, developers, they've become a buying audience of consequence. A buying audience of consequence. They can heavily influence or even just decide what tools and platforms an entire company adopts. For example, I love Cursor. I use Cursor all the time. If I go work at DataStax, IBM, and they're not using Cursor, I will say, hey, this is the tool that I am the most productive with, that I love. Can we use it? And then what's going to happen is DataStax, IBM, because they care for me and they want me to be productive, they're going to find out how I can get an enterprise license. Of course, I literally just I create value for this company because they've created such a good product that helps me enjoy them. They've got a decent DevRel function by way of having a great product that now, like, their bottom line is moving. Does that make sense? And so previously, only like CTOs used to make these decisions, right? But now with DevRel, I show up, I say I want this tool, and the company becomes a customer of the vendor, like Cursor in this case. So a great API or a great developer tool, a great product enters an organization bottom up via engineers. I think maybe if we look at success stories here, Stripe has been unbelievable. Some of you may know Stripe. Obviously, Stripe is like the greatest way to do payments on the web. Stripe, this is the reason they're successful. Like, Stripe grew explosively by winning over developers with great APIs and great design, and honestly, a great product. Their valuation went from $5 billion to $95 billion because of DevRel. Just let that sink in. It's 20x almost valuation growth purely because of DevRel. Okay. Another success story here is MongoDB, right? I think MongoDB is kind of the go-to database of choice. And the way they did that is DevRel. They really, first of all, they embraced open source, which means, hey, this is public, this is free, this is available, like anyone use it. Great move. But secondly, because it was open source, you could teach it anywhere. You could teach it in a boot camp, you could teach it wherever you want. And because of that wide adoption, MongoDB then became a company, which is now a fairly successful, I think it's the go-to, honestly, document store / NoSQL / schemaless database in the market. Incredible. These are some success stories of DevRel and how it creates huge, massive, like 20x growth in companies through bottom-up adoption. Ultimately, if you can capture, as a company, the hearts and mind of developers, you're going to make it. Yag me. Right? You are going to make it. That's one thing. DevRel also is not just like a nice to have for companies. It's strategic. Companies usually invest in DevRel for multiple reasons. Number one, I think honestly, if we speak capitalism, is just product adoption to the end of revenue. If more people use your thing, then there's more chances of them paying. And more paying means more revenue, which means more money, which means more shareholder value, ultimately. DevRel can help developers discover, trust, and successfully use the product, literally. So it's part of the DevRel professional to go to a company or customer or set of developers and say, hey, have you heard of my thing? Yes, but I hate it. Okay, well, what do you hate? Let me get that feedback, give it to the product team, even build the product myself, improve it. So you establish trust. And when more developers successfully use your product, similar to building on the Windows platform, as we talked about, more adoption means more revenue, especially in product-led growth models. DevRel can also lead to an ecosystem. I think a great success story of this is React, the way to build user interfaces on the web. Meta was very intent on creating a great ecosystem. The reason for this is React itself was really well built, is a really well built library, because it fully embraces principles of fewest responsibilities. Maybe not least responsibility or single responsibility, but definitely in its design, it has principles of least responsibility. This is also why Next.js exists, right? All it cares about is making user interface updates atomic and predictable. Period. It does not, to this day, does not come with a router for an application, does not come with server rendering, does not come with some type of authentication, like all the web stuff, nothing. It's just like small surface area. And because of that, and because of great DevRel around React, naturally an ecosystem appeared. A wild ecosystem appeared. And this ecosystem has things like Remix and React Router, Next.js and Redwood, but also has smaller things like React Emoji Picker, or my friend Jed Watson's library, React Select. All of this just because it had the single responsibility system, but it was also so compelling for developers. Now, some would say the React ecosystem is the largest developer ecosystem, at least for the web. And so DevRel, when done well, can foster an ecosystem around a product encouraging third-party integrations, open source contributions, and add-ons. When it does that, of course, it eventually reaches this idea that, oh, this product is now too big to fail, which recursively makes it grow even more, right? Until it becomes this absolute behemoth, kind of like React and Ruby on Rails. DevRel also enables some value of DevRel is you get a great feedback loop, right? Because if you're doing DevRel, if your company has a DevRel function, part of their responsibility is to get and elicit and solicit product feedback to say, hey, can you use our thing? What do you think? And this is great because usually your DevRel engineers are people of taste themselves. They just know and they're okay sharing feedback. So your feedback comes from your DevRel employees straight away, which honestly should be taken very seriously because they represent the rest of the developers. But also, they get feedback from the community. Hey, I want you to try this. I want to watch you. I want to hear what you have to. So that's like value right there. Every feedback item that you get is absolute value. So you get feedback, which then drives innovation. See, because DevRel should have constant contact with developers. You should be constantly talking to other developers. And because of that conversation, you'll get to know the pain points, the struggles, etc., and you'll get to relay that feedback, tighten the feedback loop, and ultimately reach product market fit. In fact, few people know this. Developer advocates previously used to be called outbound product managers, literally outbound product managers, because they relay insights from the field to make the product better. Just to echo this through a personal anecdote, I did a little bit of DevRel consulting for Replay.io. And Jason, the then CEO of the company, said to me, he said, when we make a DevRel hire full-time, my standard is I want them to be able to tell me the names of our first 100 users and their dog's name, or whether they have a dog or not. I want them to be that familiar with our first 100 users. Ultimately, that's what you want, right? Because then you intuit the pain points with your product and you can use it to increase the value of the product. This area of DevRel is one that I frankly believe is the most slept on. And I don't want to use a strong word, but I hate to see it. I hate to see how little product responsibility is given to DevRel. I feel very strongly about this. I've worked in DevRel for 8 years now, and in this time, I've seen a lot of people come and go, and I've seen a lot of people burn out. And some of them, usually it's because they feel like they can't have impact. For example, DevRel professionals will spend days, literally days, sometimes nights, sometimes weekends, at conferences, at developer events where developers hang out. They go to speaker dinners. They have to wake up early. It's brutal. It is absolutely brutal. And in this time, they're engaging with the developer community. In this time, at the back of their mind is, okay, this is a cool party. I'd rather be sleeping. But while I'm here, I'm going to talk to these developers about my tool, about my company's tool. And so they sometimes will go 3-4 days straight, minimal sleep, maximum. And so they're in the community, they're listening, they're gathering feedback, they're taking it all in. After the event, they'll share this feedback with the team. Hey, so I spoke to these developers, and honestly, our product in this area is way too slow. And man, we need to fix this. They all face problems here. They all complain here. They all abandon here. That feedback, I think companies, I will say this as clear as I can, companies don't value that feedback as much as they should. Companies do not value that feedback as much as they should. This feedback, I've seen it myself multiple times at multiple companies. For the entire year of 2023, I consulted with many DevRel companies, and I've seen it all over. What happens to this feedback is usually nothing, first of all. If something happens to this feedback, then the DevRel professional is asked to back it up somehow. Did you take notes? Who said it? Are they customers? Are they the right? It's heavily scrutinized. Okay. After scrutiny, nothing usually happens. If something happens, it goes into some type of backlog that the DevRel professional does not see. They don't know where it is. They don't know when it's going to be worked on. They don't know when they can go back to that community and say, hey, we've been listening, we've heard you, it's fixed. Nothing. It just sits in a backlog. They then maybe meet these community members at a future event. Hey, is it fixed? Oh no, sorry. You have other, and then they have to like justify the company that neglects their input. This has happened so frequently. Of course, it's anecdotal because nobody's going to come out and say this because they're scared they'll lose their job. But this is so common. If you've experienced this, I want to challenge you. Just be brave. Leave a comment, retweet, post, whatever. Let people know because I've seen this. I've managed DevRel teams. I've seen this all over the place. Usually, this is the worst. So there's some remediations we can do here, right? I mean, for one thing, take your DevRel people seriously. Two, a little bit of transparency could go a very long way, right? Like you could just, here's the issue, it's in the backlog. Here's when we're working on it. Here's where it's in progress. That's maybe, the next best thing. Or what if the DevRel professionals themselves, part of the hiring process is that these people are great software and product engineers. And so when they receive feedback about the product that's maybe negative, they themselves can go in and address the feedback as product engineers, wearing that hat, open a pull request, knowing exactly what the person wants, fix it, submit it to the engineering team. Engineering team reviews, approves, whatever, and it's in, right? They directly have their fingerprints on the fix. And the moment that fix is made, they go on social media or they go to the person directly. Hey, I fixed your feedback. Thank you for that. I believe this is the way to do DevRel well and to do it right. This is far from the status quo of DevRel today, which is a real shame because the way it is today, DevRel engineers are set up for failure because, well, the feedback is usually not addressed. And at some point, the economy gets hard, something goes wrong, we need to do layoffs. And usually the first or among the first to go are DevRel people because according to the business, they have failed to have impact when the organization itself has failed to let them, to enable, to allow them, to create an environment where they can have impact. So this is my challenge, my desire to anyone listening who's able to make such decisions. Let your DevRel people fix your products, or let them have impact. Let that impact be clear. Let it be transparent, and watch. There's also, I mean, you could have just different KPIs for DevRel. We'll talk more about this later, but I will while I'm on this tangent, I will say one of the KPIs for DevRel could be time between feedback received and feedback addressed, the latency. You reported the feedback on June 8th. On June 11th, it was addressed. Great, you're doing good. You reported the feedback on June 8th. On November 8th, it was when it was addressed. Bad, right? That alone creates a great flywheel and a feedback loop that can clearly demonstrate DevRel impact far better than other, how many people went to my meetup? Who cares? That's marketing, right? And so there's ways around this where DevRel can have more of an impact on the product than today. And this is, I think, probably the most important thing I'll say in this episode. DevRel also is valuable by enabling developers with resources. We literally like enable, we write the documentation sometimes, create software development kits, SDKs, tutorials, etc. When you have frictionless developer experience, users are happier and they stick with the product. And not only do they stick with the product, they also like recommend it. DevRel creates a trusted brand and community. So when you have a strong developer community, the company has a better reputation. The company has a better reputation, they have a higher valuation. Ultimately, the company is more likely to get acquired or IPO or make some type of exit. DevRel helps position the company as developer friendly and maybe even as an attractive place to work if you're trying to hire. So developers who feel supported and heard because you actually care about their feedback, they just become even more loyal advocates, right? And so ultimately, all of these points come together to tell us that DevRel is a growth engine when executed correctly for tech companies. By investing in education, community, developer experience, DevRel not only increases adoption, but also builds goodwill and feedback loops that benefit the entire business. It's a long-term strategy to cultivate trust with a critical audience. But let's talk a little bit about its place in the organization. We already kind of talked about where it sits in the product and so on, but let's double click on this a little bit. Right now, DevRel has very different reporting structures across very different companies. And again, the context here, there's links in the show notes. Most of this is from Wikipedia or developerrelations.com or even Dell Technologies Capital. There's a bunch of sources, but some anecdata comes from the entire year. I spent an entire year, 2023, doing DevRel consulting at a variety of organizations. And I will say this, DevRel has strange reporting structures across companies. There is no single correct place for DevRel in the org chart, but there's some statistics. So a survey in 2021, link in the show notes, showed that DevRel teams 26% of the time report to marketing. 26% of the time report to marketing, and 17% of the time report to product, 16% of the time report to engineering, and sometimes directly to the CEO or CTO or some C-level, or they're their own department. They don't report to anyone. I guess unless the CEO and CTO. But the big majority here is definitely marketing, 26% of the time. So 1 in 4 companies has DevRel as a function of marketing. And honestly, there's a big debate about this. Should DevRel be in marketing? Should it be in product or engineering? You know where I stand, hopefully. I think it's a mistake to have DevRel in marketing. I think it should be a product engineering role, mainly because your impact is more clear. Because it's, again, developers trust developers. Okay, fine. I'll do another anecdata thing. Brahms. I mentioned Brahms earlier. Chrome DevRel. Sometimes and he's not the only one. I've had this too. A lot of my DevRel friends have had this, where we do a great talk, and people come to us after, and they say, "Wow, you actually showed code. You know how to code. I didn't know you know how to code. I thought you were just a mouthpiece. Now I respect you more because I saw that you can code." Developers love other developers. They don't respond well to just like entertainers. And so I think I would, if I was to start my own company or define, like if I joined somewhere as a C, whatever, definitely DevRel would be a function of product, not marketing. Because also, I mean, anyway, so like, okay, the feedback loop we talked about, the KPIs just become way more clear. If you're not affecting the product, you're not doing your job, you know? I think the gold standard for DevRel is you're a product engineer with a megaphone. You build great things into the product, usually addressing outside-in feedback or just your own innovations. And then you go on conferences, meetups, social media, and you talk about it. I built this thing. This is why. Here's how. Here's the technical details. Oh my God. That honestly, if I see that, that's peak DevRel to me. Okay. Companies, as mentioned, they place DevRel under marketing, usually because DevRel to them will drive awareness, run events, produce content, etc. But you know, that's not, you don't have to be a developer to produce content. Just go on TikTok, right? You'll find recipes and stuff. Yeah, I think honestly for me, it's no question, because again, I value technical credibility and tight integration with the product development cycle. And so yeah, where DevRel is placed can really have a profound effect on the organization, yes, but also on the professional working there. Your performance review is going to directly reflect where DevRel is placed. I can share, I've received, I'm not going to say where, but I tend to lean more towards product. I just love building stuff, honestly. And we had this time where I built a number of fantastic products that have shown value, products that honestly I still use today, products that people receive well, developers receive well, especially when I talk about here's how it's built. They go like, wow, I didn't know that was possible. Really, really wonderful products. And I thought I was doing a good job. But then came time for a performance review with my manager. And it's the kind of thing where you rate yourself and then your manager rates you, and then you talk about like, you know, why is this different? And so anyway, I rated myself very highly. And I tried my best not to come from a place of like conceit or pride, but from a place of like realisticness and honor. And I was very surprised to find that my manager's rating of me was less than that. It was not as good as I thought I was. So I asked him about it. I said, hey, why? What happened? Turns out, he said, hey, all of these things you did are great. You built great products. But how many of those developers are like building with us today? How many of those developers are converting, right? So if you were a product engineer, absolutely, I'd agree with your self-rating. But you're not. You're in DevRel, and DevRel is a function of marketing, and your numbers aren't there. Yeah, and so the point I'm trying to make is where DevRel falls in an org chart affects a lot of things. And if you're considering working in DevRel, maybe you are already working in DevRel, it impacts directly your performance and how that performance is measured. I think you've got to also and then this is maybe worth like if you're interviewing for a DevRel position, this is maybe worth asking about, right? Like, hey, how am I going to be evaluated? Am I going to be evaluated on like a tight feedback loop or and product features, or am I going to be evaluated on like how many friends come to your party? And there's nothing wrong with either. You might bias towards one or the other, and you want to make sure that that's aligned before you join some DevRel function. Okay, because honestly, if you don't enjoy lead generation and top of funnel metrics and so on, maybe the marketing side is not for you. Similarly, if you enjoy developer experience, you're going to create an SDK, you're going to create like a nice API, then you've got to ask these things, right? I think the third thing about this is external developers, your audience, can tell. They have a sixth sense. They can tell if DevRel is operating like an arm of marketing versus an engineering aligned team, just by the tone and the authenticity of their interactions. I will challenge you right now. Pause this and think to yourself. Make a list, 2-column list. Marketing DevRel, product DevRel. Put companies down. I think you will know if you're a developer. I can say Vercel, for example, product DevRel, right? In any case, I think honestly, DevRel has to toe that line very well, because developers don't enjoy being the targets of marketing, especially by non-technical people. We respond better to peers, like engineers who understand our specific challenges instead of some polished marketing message. If DevRel is viewed purely as marketing, I think you're going to struggle to earn trust. Similar to Brahmas, who people went like, oh, I don't know you code. If you structure DevRel under product or engineering, companies, they signal that DevRel's mission is to help developers succeed with the product, not just to sell to them and convert. And so it just lends itself to more trust that way. Similarly, developers can directly affect the feedback loop and the product. It just, honestly, I sound biased. It's because I am, but I don't know. You may like meetup numbers and so on. Okay, under a product-centric model, DevRel is not going to be the interesting thing about DevRel is it's such a long game. How do you measure the quality of a relationship? I'll tell you how I measure the quality of a relationship. And the reason I'm talking about this is because, like, it's in the name, DevRel, relationship, rel. I measure a strong weight and bias in my measure of the quality of a relationship is the time domain. I have my friend JB. I've been very close friends with JB since grade like 4, right? I was like 8 years old. Since I was 8, I'm now 32. For the last 24 years, I've been friends with JB. I tell you, that's a high quality relationship, because through everything we've been through in that time, we're still friends. Similar, my dear friend Fabien, right? I've known him as long as I've been in DevRel, pretty much. And we're still friends. I'm going to his wedding in 2 weeks, right? And so then if time is so crucial to quality relationships, how can you have short-term KPIs with DevRel? How can you have like, hey, how many leads did you generate in the last week? I don't know. That doesn't indicate the quality of your relationship with developers. It has to be qualitative. And so that's another reason why I say short-term, especially short-term marketing, like top of funnel KPIs just can't work. Whereas You can measure the quality of relationships by satisfaction and usage, right? Like if I have a good relationship with someone, if they keep coming to me with their stuff and I get the opportunity to show up to them. If they keep coming, hey Tejas, you were cooking, I'm hungry, great. I'm so glad you feel so at home with me. If they keep coming back, and so I think a great KPI, instead of like how many leads did you generate, a great KPI is, hey, do developers keep on using our thing? Do developers keep on using our thing? And are they happy? You could do something like an NPS survey, Net Promoter Score survey, that will help you identify that. DevRel is not about growth. I need to say this. DevRel is not about just growth, definitely not about acute growth. It's about sustainable growth. It's about long-term growth. One DevRel leader even described DevRel's ideal end state as making the entire company more developer focused. And so I think that's so I'd say poignant about what DevRel is. DevRel also involves advocating for a product, right? It doesn't work in a silo away from marketing or sales. I think that's, now you think, okay, cool, that's not marketing, but it can't be siloed from marketing or sales. You've got to collaborate with marketing and sales in practice. And we see this through a variety of surveys. Again, links in the show notes. This is not my opinion. High performing DevRel teams they're cross-functional bridges, right? They partner with marketing for events and content, absolutely. And then they partner with engineering for product improvements. When I worked at Spotify has this amazing concept called embedding, where you're normally in team A, but for a season you will embed in team B to help team B meet their goal, because team B's goal is kind of your goal. Then you will embed with team C. This is what I'm saying for DevRel, is DevRel can be its own team, definitely not siloed from marketing or sales or engineering, but will for a season, here's a great picture. Pause this, clip this, share this. What I'm about to say is so profound. DevRel could partner with marketing to go attend an event, speak at an event, organize an event, sponsor an event, whatever it may be. At this event, you're going to get a bunch of feedback. You're going to get a lot of feedback. And then they're going to bring the feedback in. Some of this feedback might be product feedback. Hey, I don't like this spinner. Hey, that's taking too long to load. Hey, I don't get this API. Then they switch from being embedded in marketing to being embedded in product. They fix the feedback they receive. Can you imagine? I would love that. When all the feedback is dealt with, okay, what conferences are looking for speakers? They go back to, right? That's cross-functional impact. And that's ultimately aligned with the core mandate of DevRel, which is serving developer needs. Serving developer needs. That's it. How do you serve developer needs? I'm convinced, honestly, it's through this bi-directional, cross-functional embedding structure. So again, this is not just me. SendGrid's PM, again, SendGrid was one of the best DevRel stories of all time. SendGrid's PM, Matt Bernier, said DevRel teams share the same goal as product managers. And that goal, and I'm quoting him, he says, is to make the customer, in this case the developer, happy and help build things they need. That's it. So how you do that is by speaking at conferences when you align with marketing, meetups, workshops, whatever, getting feedback, and then using that feedback in your product, in your SDK. And that is honestly the gold standard of DevRel. If an organization isn't working this way, I think it's missing out on the value that DevRel could unlock. So there are trade-offs as well, just to be fair. Some companies that are very marketing focused, DevRel might report to marketing, but that just means they have to work very hard. A big trade-off when you align so closely with marketing is you don't get to maintain your technical integrity, right? Like if all you do is yap, then people are going to catch on and they're going to be like, oh, I haven't seen, what was the last thing you built of quality? Why should I listen to you yapping, right? That's a real struggle. I've had that struggle. Similarly, in a very technical product company, if DevRel is under engineering, yeah, okay, this person builds great things, but I can't listen to them speak. They like fall asleep, right? So I think the best structure ultimately is one that empowers DevRel to maintain authenticity while advocating both internally and externally and having direct impact on the product. I think there's, again, links in the show notes. LinkedIn and Dell's survey, DTC, Dell Technologies Capital, both say that when you put DevRel closer to product or engineering, you get the right balance. And so I think, honestly, like I've said it a bunch of times now, DevRel just works better as a function of product engineering and not marketing. Okay. How might we measure DevRel success? How might we measure DevRel success? And why does measurement even matter? Well, I think measurement matters because you want to know, like, do we lay these people off or not? I think some metrics that can help justify DevRel programs is helpful, but it's hard because you're measuring something squishy. You're measuring like the quality of relationships. In sales, right? Revenue is your clear metric. With DevRel, the contributions are like indirect and long term. You can't like make some. I guess you can make people happy in the short term if you like give them coffee or something, but they're less likely to convert when they go home. You know what I mean? And so it's hard. Oftentimes, also, we need meaningful metrics with DevRel, not just vanity metrics. GitHub stars are cool, but what do they mean? You know, here's a direct comparison of a bad metric versus a good metric. Hey, how much swag did we distribute at a conference? Bad metric. Just means you might as well have burnt your swag. A good metric is, hey, how many developers are actively using our API? You know, because that has it tells a story about the product and how developers feel about it. Whereas if someone took a bunch of your caps, okay, what does that mean? There was a quote, I don't know who, this was by a real man. There's a link in the show notes anyway. He says, don't get caught focusing on outputs, tweets, talks, YouTube videos, blog posts, without linking them to outcomes, adoption, satisfaction, adherence, etc. Most DevRel teams make the sometimes brutal mistake of getting caught up purely on outputs. Are you doing this? Are you writing these blog posts? Are you making these YouTube videos? And linking them to outcomes is often an afterthought. I think that's something that most DevRel teams need to, that's a muscle that DevRel teams need to flex. Finally, asking the question, what does success look like to us, will help choose metrics accordingly. Regardless, if we're talking about how to measure DevRel, we need to look at both qualitative and quantitative metrics. And so we'll need to understand what they look like for various measures. For example, if we consider community engagement, we need to ultimately understand how actively developers are participating in the community we've built. Quantitatively, this can include things like, how many forum posts, how many Discord messages, Slack, how many tweets are people mentioning us on stars on GitHub. These are all quantitative. Yeah, it's quantity. How many issues on GitHub? How many people came to our meetup? So many quantitative things. For example, if you have like how many monthly active users on our forums, quantitative, right? So it's quantity. On the qualitative side, we measure the quality of interactions, not so much the quantity. So are the discussions on your forums, are they like helpful, or is it just people saying things? For example, are of the tweets that people are posting, are they good quality, or is it just this is good, and is that even high quality? Like Drizzle has really interesting qualitative work, and so ultimately engagement is something of a bedrock for advocacy, right? Like if you're just present in forums, chats, if people know you exist, ideally close to your competitors, you're doing well. However, you usually can't boil down engagement to one number, right? Because like you could have like one really passionate evangelist who is paying everything, and they might outweigh like 100 people who just like lurk your forum. And so you'll want to combine qualitative and quantitative metrics to understand, hey, are we doing well? I think social media gives you some auxiliary metrics as well, impressions, shares, things like that. Generally though, while the data itself can be sketch, trends are almost never sketch. So this is one just classic data analysis trick. Look at your trend. Are things trending upwards? Are things trending downwards? If they're trending upwards, good, DevRel is working. Ideally, those things that are trending upwards are monthly active developers. Second thing to measure, are developers happy? Are developers happy and successful with your product? I think if you're doing DevRel well, you will hear this either at conferences or on social media. Are they happy, one, and are they able to be successful? Sometimes you may have a great product. It may have a beautiful UI, lots of polish and stuff, but people can't be successful with it. Why? It's your job as a DevRel professional to find out, why can't you be successful with this? What are we missing? And so if you want to understand satisfaction, you'll need the combination of a qualitative input, something like like a net promoter score, NPS, specifically about developer experience, and a quantitative one. How much of the NPS scores can we get in aggregate? Another indirect metric you can look at is support load or repeated questions. I have popularly built something that has been successful where if you have documentation, you just highlight a portion of the text and you get a little tooltip. I don't understand this. When a developer clicks on that, they get immediately pointed to help, but also it's an internal flag for DevRel professionals to go like, this is unclear. If you keep getting the same questions over and over again, even after improving your documentation, then maybe developers are having a hard time finding like what they need. You'll need to think about SEO. You'll need to think about maybe they're just interacting with ChatGPT and you're not in there. You'll need to think about doing something like LLMs.txt or other optimization strategies. This episode's not about that. We'll maybe have another one about that, but yeah. Sentiment analysis is another way, right? Are people saying good things? Are they saying bad things, etc.? Finally, you'll want to measure your reach. Like how far are things going? Does it stop at the conference we spoke at, or does it have a life beyond the conference we spoke? Did someone watch our talks and take it to their companies, and then did those go to other meetups and do even more talks, and so on? A very easy way of doing this quantitatively is by tracking unique visitors to your getting started guides around conferences, right? That's a great way you can just develop some correlation. If people have high documentation usage and decent time on page, it means it's valuable. Time on page is sometimes called dwell time. If the bounce rate is very high or if time on page is low, you must be thinking, people maybe don't care about what we have to say here. It's also worth using things like UTMs to track content-driven referrals. Like, okay, they land on this page from the conference talk, but where do they go from there? Do they find the sign up button, for example, right? That's really, really useful, even for blog posts. It's worth paying attention to that. And if you don't have a strong UTM structure, I'd suggest creating one. Similarly, another qualitative measure is the feedback loop of your product. It's very qualitative, meaning is it improving the quality literally of the product, or is it just adding noise more than signal? Quantitatively, of course, this can be how many pull requests did you merge into the product, and so on. Adi Pollack, one of the pillars of DevRel, one of the leaders, says DevRel is a conduit for, and I'm quoting directly, DevRel is a conduit for feedback between developers who use your software and the engineers who build the software. It's a conduit for feedback between developers who use your software and the engineers who build the software. And the emphasis is a strong developer feedback loop can make the product infinitesimally better. And so that's, I think I've spent enough time talking about that. You can also measure adoption and revenue contribution, right? Ultimately, look, all for-profit companies care about profit. And if DevRel leads to product adoption and then revenue, this is something to pay attention to. In fact, adoption metrics need to be something of a North Star of DevRel. Tracking MAD, that is monthly active developers, or similar activation metrics is quite valuable. How many developers are actively using this every month? And are those numbers growing? Sean Swix Wang, a friend of mine, just a DevRel OG, he says this is honestly a critical metric. If your MAD, monthly active developers, is growing, DevRel's working. If it's flat or declining, something's wrong. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Of course, other adoption metrics is the number of new developers signing up versus retaining old developers, API usage growth, etc., etc. But MAD, I can't overstate the value of MAD. You could also have like DevRel influenced opportunities. So a lot of companies have sales pipelines, right? They have qualified leads and so on. QLs, they're called. And how they the idea is this: they get a bunch of leads from various things, and then they qualify those leads. This person works at this company. We're trying this company fits our ICP, our our ideal customer profile. And so they then qualify these leads into like, okay, these are good leads. How do we like reach out to them? You could have DQLs, DevRel qualified leads. This is proposed by Mary Thengval, again, links in the show notes, where DQL, like regular qualified leads, is a developer who engages deeply and could provide value to the company. So you have your leads, maybe come from a conference or some DevRel/marketing activity, and DevRel qualifies them for the DevRel pipeline. DevRel can then track these individuals. For example, a developer who built a cool integration after attending your workshop could be a great DQL, right? And if you count DQLs and conversion rates, you can connect DevRel to business outcomes more clearly that way. DevRel teams have like two types of metrics usually. There's operational metrics, and those are like for internal improvement. For example, how fast do we respond to people on Twitter? How regularly do we create content? So these are operational. They're literally, how does your team operate? And there's also strategic metrics for leadership. This is, how is our MAD, monthly active developers, growing? How is our net promoter score growing, etc. I think it's important to abide by that categorization, right? How many are, or rather, where are operational metrics and where are our strategic metrics, and are both trending upwards? Because DevRel ultimately is multidimensional. It's not just about developers, it's about engaged, satisfied, effective developers and great content, and ultimately a better product that people find joy in paying for, that they don't need to be coerced to pay for. But DevRel, through its work on the product, has created such a compelling product that is actively listening to users, that users are like, you know what? I will pay for this because it's worth every cent. All right. Some people are paying $200 a month for OpenAI's ChatGPT Pro, right? Because it's supposedly that good. I'm not paying that, but it's great. So now that we know what DevRel is, where it fits, how to gauge its impact, let's get super practical. How do we actually do DevRel well? Let's talk about that. So what we want to talk about is just, some practical takeaways for how we can actually do DevRel really well. Number one, let's start by talking about building a community. The foundation of DevRel is just having a great community, right? And so how can we create and nurture spaces for developers to connect? Do we have a Discord? Do we have a Slack, Twitter, etc.? Ultimately, it's going to come down to listening. Where do you best listen, and where do your people hang out? This obviously varies from company to company, but I think it's kind of standard, honestly, to be on X, formerly Twitter. That's where most people are anyway, and that's my go-to. But from there, you could do a bunch of things. You could do a space. You could do a poll. You could do a poll and ask Discord or Slack, and then start a Discord. I think that's really the town square, as Musk likes to say. So you could seed discussions with topics and really start that way. But ultimately, your community will either live or die on how genuine you are. I think it's important that the intent behind starting and growing a community is clear, and developers can sense intention very well. If they think, oh, this person's starting a community so they can like spam me regularly, your community is not going to thrive, right? Versus if it's, hey, like, we're building a platform like Windows and we want to listen to Windows developers, we want to meet you where you are, we want to enable you, then that community is, there's a good chance it's more likely to grow. Again, not my opinion. There's links to show note to research in the show notes. It's also important to recognize and reward active community members. Meta used to do this well with React. I think they're still doing this actually, where if they see someone really active with open source, they'll just hire them. Hey, you're doing so good, let's pay you for it. Similar things like ambassador programs or swag giveaways, shout outs, all of this, just, it's like, hey, thank you, genuinely, thank you for being a part of our community and adding to it. I think that reward is helpful in growing communities. For example, Stack Overflow, GitHub. I think there's a company doing a really good job with this right now. I'm not gonna say us, that would be biased. I think Clerk, for example, is doing well. You also want to have some type of content strategy, right? A lot of DevRel is creating content for the community. Once you have a community, you need to feed them. That's really important. You'll need to have some type of content pipeline where you regularly push tutorials, blog posts, videos, sample apps, documentation. You don't want to just create stuff for the sake of creating stuff, though. You want to be receptive to needs. Where's the pain points? What are they struggling? Content should mainly teach problem solving, which is also what engineering is. It can't be an ad. Okay. I think developers, I'm, for example, an example here, can just sniff out fluff. And honestly, if it's not specific and technical without vendor bias, you're going to lose, right? I think here's bad example, good example. Bad example of technical content is, here's why our database is great. I would never read this. Versus, here's how you build this thing using our database. That I would like to know how to build like semantic movie search with Pinecone, as opposed to here's why Pinecone is great. You know, show me the value through a use case. Usually, um, usually DevRel engineers have anyway 1 foot in engineering and 1 foot in content, so leverage that engineering thing. I think that's very helpful. As for formats, this is going to depend on your community. Blog posts, videos typically tend to do well. I think they're the usual. Um, and documentation ultimately is just living content, right? It's supposed to be always up to date. I think what's really important is to have a consistent content cadence. Mr. Beast was on Lex Friedman. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, where he was asked, what would you tell someone who wants to like make it on YouTube, like you, Mr. Beast? And Jimmy said, what the advice I would give is, don't even come talk to me unless you've made 100 videos. And so you've just got to be consistent, because over time, a lot of the things you're overthinking will figure themselves out if you just keep acting and shipping. Just keep shipping. I think that's really important. We had a great presentation at a DevRel onsite at DataStax by the great Tildy Anathurium, who formerly was at Twilio, who taught us a lot of things. One of the things Tildy taught us was this idea of carving the turkey. So Thanksgiving in America, you have a huge bird, big turkey, and you carve it and you carve it and you get meat and you get meat. And so the thesis is this: you can have like you make a sample app. This is your turkey, and then you carve the turkey by, okay, I'm gonna now make a blog post about how I built this. Now I'm gonna make a YouTube video about how I built this. And now I'm gonna do this. And I'm gonna do that. Like you have this one turkey that you make as a DevRel professional, and then you carve that turkey by creating many content pieces. This has been super valuable for me and my team for reusing and repurposing content that we've put our heart and souls into. Another way of practically doing DevRel is obviously to care about the onboarding experience for developers, and just thinking about their experience with high degrees of empathy, right? You've got to think about, okay, so you've got to run through the flows of your product many, many times from scratch. I'm a first-time user. I'm going to click sign up. Okay, log in with Google. Oh, now I'm just dropped into a page right? You've got to think about the wizard, the onboarding experience. You've got to think about, where do they go from the moment they land on the first page to the point where you want them to be, the point of becoming an API user, that entire journey needs to be well traveled by your DevRel team before you expect developers to go down. That is a minefield, and it is the responsibility of the DevRel team to navigate that minefield, to get rid of all the mines, and then you invite your developers to come walk that. It is so important, because usually these paths are full of friction, and it's your job to remove them and significantly reduce the time to first success. Twilio, I think, did a great job of this. They used to have 5-minute demos where you can send your first SMS using their API in minutes. That's because I'm sure there was a lot of work that went into removing the friction, removing the mines, and making very, very sure that developers can be successful quickly. Setting up quick start guides, invaluable for this. You need a quick start. It needs to take 5 minutes. It can't be more. And I think it's important also to keep a log of friction points. It's called friction logging, which it's a process in which you act as the first user to spot issues. Super, super important. If something took too many steps, if it wasn't clear, etc. Very, very important. Another tenet of this is developer experience. Do we have a CLI, command line interface? Should we benefit from one? Do we have a Postman collection? What is the stat? How do we do authentication? Is it one click? Do we have single sign-on? Like, all of these questions are part of developer experience, and they are paramount to your success, which honestly, documentation is also a part of this, right? While we're talking about documentation, there's like the actual docs site that your users can go to, which is a separate site. But there's also like in-product documentation, right? Like you sign in, you see an empty screen, and there's documentation right there that says, welcome. do this, click here, right? There's guidance I'm talking about documentation in a holistic way, not just some separate site, but like user guidance. It is so important as onboarding. Okay, you want to effectively just give them a guided tour, and you want to remove things like surveys, who are you, why should you, whatever, before they use your product. Does that make sense? I'm happy to share with you actually a case study of something I did at DataStax that has been quite valuable, at least to me. Again, some people would say, oh, but you can't measure it. I'm like, look, I don't. Langflow, it's a product we create. And if you go to datastax.com/Langflow, I did this and I found out it was a 404. So I was like, wow. And so I flagged that internally. And then I found out that it was datastax.com/product/Langflow. And nothing happened to datastax.com/Langflow. In any case, maybe it's fixed today. Who knows? But let me know in the comments. But I digress. When you go and visit the Langflow website, the path to action is like read the docs, or I think it was on datastax.com/product/Langflow. You get invited to create an account before ever using Langflow. And as a developer, you're thinking, why should I create an account? And so I recognized, hey, there's friction here. So what I did was I created something called langflow.new, which is a website where you just go on that and you can just use Langflow. Just use it. No strings attached. Just use it. Use it. Play. Feel its value. When you want to save it, we'll ask you to make an account, but play first. This is similar to what Apple did, with their retail stores. Like, it's important that you get your hands on a MacBook, you touch an iPhone, you feel it, and then you decide to buy it, right? That's just some anecdata to help you. Another function of DevRel, how you practically do it, is you participate in events. You do some public speaking here and there. Often DevRel will put a face to a technology, and you are that face if you're a DevRel professional. It's important to attend and speak, because when you speak, you get to teach. So I will say this, there's a question here about what makes a talk good. Honestly, what makes a talk good, we've talked about this already, is technical depth and detail, right? Developers don't want to hear like marketing, they want to hear utility. And so thinking about, here's how we built X, here's how you can build Y, live code a bunch of stuff is going to go well for you. Demos, fantastic. But if you're just like, here's why our database is great, to a room full of people who haven't heard of and don't care about your database, you're going to have a hard time. Here's an example. Here again, good example, bad example. Good example is a good example of a talk could be, here's how we lowered our P99 performance. By lowered, I mean made everything faster, for a website of like 100 million users a week, right? Great, it's hands-on. Here's a bad version of that. ISR is great. Like incremental static regeneration. Like, who cares if it's, I want to know what its value is for my business, right? You want to be authentic. I think that's very important. I think we'll do maybe a separate episode entirely on just public speaking, so I'm trying not to spend too much time here. But ultimately, you're going to want to speak at conferences, hold workshops, do like live events where you're teaching, because then you can also get real-time feedback about your product that you can then take and either have it be ignored or have it fix the product. Online events are also great. Webinars, live streams, etc. Don't underestimate them. I just recently spoke at Front End Nation. Thousands of people saw this, and it was definitely valuable. Okay. Ultimately, look, as a developer relations professional, your job is to humanize your company. You want to add the soul. Okay. One maybe unsung hero of DevRel is internal advocacy. We've talked so far about doing external stuff, whether it's, fixing product, doing documentation, going to conferences, onboarding experience, whatever. We've talked about all this stuff, but there's a whole function, a whole part of the job that is internal facing. You're going to want to talk to your internal engineers as well about, here's what developers are facing. You want to take that outside thing, bring it inside. You're going to like record videos of yourself. I've done this. I've recorded videos of myself with people at conferences with their consent, and then share that with my company. Here's Jack Harrington talking about Langflow. I've done that, right? Here's Jason Torres. I got on a call with him. I asked him if I can record it, and I shared it internally. DevRel is both external facing, as we talked about, but also internal facing. You're going to want to bring the developer voice into your company. Ideally, there's a layer of transparency there where the developers themselves can see their voice heard, public GitHub, Jira board, whatever. That would be really, really awesome. And I think, if you can not just have a great feedback loop, but close it and post on social media things to the effect of, you asked, we listened, you're gonna be in a very good place. I think there's a lot of companies that just don't listen. And so I think those are some points just to start with. I'd love to recap a little bit, but I think everything I say is not worth listening to unless you get the main fact that DevRel is all about relationships. It's DevRel and not DevCell. It's DevRel and not DevCell. Yes, I was the first person to say that. There's evidence on X. And so you've got to be thinking, how can I build great relationships? How can I be that bridge? How can I hear the complaints and fix the product? How can I do that? It's highly relational. It can't be measured acutely because relationships usually are measured by their time domain, okay? Developer relations, I'm just gonna start summarizing this. Developer relations is a strategic function that is at the intersection of product, engineering, and community. It started with the need to engage developers on their own terms, useful content, community support, and great DX, rather than traditional marketing. We saw how DevRel can be structured in an organization, and we argued quite heavily that keeping it close to product and engineering best serves developers' interests and the feedback loop. We discussed how to measure DevRel success with metrics around community engagement, satisfaction, content impact, feedback, and adoption, reinforcing that DevRel's value can and should be demonstrated in tangible ways. Finally, we talked about actionable things. How do you speak at conferences? How do you, and we may do a series of how you actually do those things. Let me know in the comments if you want that, or actually best at me on social media, say you want it, I'll do it if you do. Finally, this whole thing, as I mentioned, is about serving developers. If you invest in helping developers be successful with genuine support, education, and improvements, then they will be successful and they will attribute that success to you and you win. Successful DevRel requires empathy, patience, and genuine passion for technology and people. It's really about caring for a community as much as it is about coding. For those new to DevRel, or maybe you're thinking about getting into DevRel, it is a team sport. You've got to collaborate across your company, that's product, marketing, docs, support, and deliver just a cohesive, beautiful experience. For people in DevRel for a long time, you'll know already that you've got to continuously refine your strategy, right? It's an ever-evolving living standard. Finally, we'll wrap it here. I want to wrap up by sharing with you a live mentorship session I did with Africa's DevRel community, as I mentioned at the beginning. The DevRel community had great questions. I didn't want it to be a monologue, much like this episode has been. And so let's air that now. What you'll hear is actual questions from people with actual takeaways, and I hope you enjoy it. To start with, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page by understanding AI specifically. And we can talk, I think, maybe together about developer relations and what that is, because I'm assuming that many of you have a background in developer relations. That's why you're here. But AI is somewhat newer. AI is definitely newer than developer relations, right? And so with that, let me just start by defining what AI is and what AI engineering is. And for this, I'm just going to use this great article by my friend Sean titled Rise of the AI Engineer. If you haven't read this, this is where you start if you want to start using AI well, and even just understanding what AI is. And in it, he talks about where AI engineering lies, and this is so important. This graphic is so important because on the left you've got data and research, machine learning research. This is like academic stuff for people with PhDs, and machine learning engineers and data scientists. And this is all like Python people who train models and do inference and stuff. And then you've got this big line down the middle, which is the API. And in front of the API, you have the AI engineer. This is really, really, really important that this is where AI is. And then full stack, it, of course, composes AI because AI is just a part of your stack. Ideally, you have something like Postgres on the back end, Express in the API, React in the front end, and AI is somewhere there as part of your stack. That's literally a stack, okay? This is very, very important just to start our discussion. And we can have confidence in this because of this quote here, which says in numbers, there's probably going to be more AI engineers than machine learning engineers or large language model engineers. And one can be quite successful in this role without ever training anything. Meaning you don't need to know Python. You don't need to know any of this machine learning stuff to do AI. They're separate. They're very separate. And the person saying this, Andre Karpathy, is the co-founder of OpenAI. Okay, so like he's the brains behind ChatGPT. And if he says this, then it's true because he's really an authority here. So with that, that's what AI engineering is. Let's talk a little bit about what DevRel is, because this is really DevRel meets AI. And then I'm happy to take your questions based on everything I've said. DevRel, developer relations, is exactly what it sounds like. It's cultivating and nourishing and creating high quality relationships with developers. The motivations for this really depend on the organization and the company. Some companies say, hey, go have a great relationship with James Q. Quick, so then we can ask him for favors. If you want to do it like that, you can, but I don't necessarily run DevRel organizations like that. For me, it's about a higher purpose than just profit and favors. But ultimately, that's what it is, right? Similarly, you can have, outside of developer relations, you can have human relations where maybe you have a wife or a husband, or maybe you're dating. These are also relationships. And those relationships typically don't work if they're conditional, and they don't work if you're trying to get something from a person. And it doesn't work if you're just, I want to be nice to you so then I can like get free coffee. It just doesn't. And so you need to take all the things you know about high quality relationships and apply them to developers. And this is a problem because, okay, but that doesn't monetize immediately, right? That doesn't immediately drive profits up for the business. And so you've got to make sure that your company is on the same page as you are about this. And they may want to get a lot of profit from relationships, but that's not, no relationship in the world works that way, where you meet someone, you have no rapport, and suddenly they just give you profit, unless it's an emergency, or unless your product is so great that they don't even need a relationship, they just give you that. But the whole point of relationships is that they take time. They take time before anything happens. And so I think that's very important. So what is DevRel? It's just having high quality relationships with developers such that at some unknown point in the future, there may be value you get from it, or maybe not. How does DevRel then give you value if not immediate profit? It gives you value through feedback. If you listen closely, and this is one of the key skills for DevRel, is listening closely. If you listen closely, again, good relationships, if you're in a romantic one or a professional one, any relationship, listening is a huge part of it. If you listen to developers well, then immediate value you can get from DevRel is feedback. They'll tell you what they think about your product. Is it a good product? Is it a bad product? Do they change the branding? Do they change the messaging, etc.? You also get value from them if your product is truly resonating with them. If the feedback is almost always positive, then they themselves will go be your advocates. They will go tell people, hey, I want to go use bolt.new because it's a great tool. I used it. It was great success. Those are two ways that you can get high quality value immediately from DevRel. And if you're not getting those immediately from DevRel, it's a red flag. It means you're doing something wrong. If DevRel within the first 1 month isn't getting you any feedback, then you need to rethink your DevRel strategy. Okay, so that's what DevRel is. One final thing I'll say, and then I want to open it up for discussion and questions, is Apple, Dell, HP, IBM, any company really that has customers has customer relations. And the difference between customer relations and developer relations is that your customers are developers. But developer relations really is the same as customer relations, except your customers are developers. And so take everything you know about customer relations, support, enablement, sending customers like gifts, like, hey, we hope you like the new, like all of customer relations is translatable to DevRel, okay? And every company on earth from like literally decades ago has had customer relations, because if you have a good quality relationship with your customers, then your customers will like you and they'll buy more of your stuff, but also they'll recommend you to everyone else. Like Tupperware parties. Anyone remember these? I don't know if you even had these, because there's a variety of different people here. But back in the day, a long time ago, there were these things called Tupperware parties, which was exactly what it sounds like. Tupperware is a brand that makes like boxes that you can put food in and package up and give to your friends and stuff. And they would have Tupperware. They started this. It was like a marketing campaign where like someone, like usually a mom, because back in those days, moms used to just have the freedom to be at home without having to work to survive. Moms would just like cook a bunch of food and have Tupperware parties. So they would invite all their friends and they would just have these boxes, these plastic boxes. And they'd be like, check out my boxes. How cool, boxes. And then they would like get a bunch of boxes for free. And then they would like recursively have more Tupperware parties. This was like customer relations done very well, or DevRel done very well. If we translate this to DevRel, it would be like, hey, here's an application that we made. Use it for free. ChatGPT is a great example of this, right? ChatGPT is free. And it's like, use this and generate some code. Wow, it's great. And then you bring all your friends. You're like, oh, check this out, man. It makes code. Wow. That's similar Tupperware party vibes, but for developers, right? And so that is, I think, just a high-level overview of what is AI engineering and what is DevRel. And together we can talk about maybe the crossover between these, but I've been talking now for like 15 minutes. I want to pause and take your questions and hear from you.
Thank you so much, Tejas. Everyone, remember to put the question in the chat if you don't mind, if you don't want to unmute and ask. Otherwise, you can just raise your hand and give us all the questions. Fatima, you can go.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Tejas. Nice to have you here. I do listen to your podcast and it keeps me company, like when I'm working out or when I'm doing chores. So I appreciate your podcasts and your content. So you mentioned some things that resonated with me in terms of customer relations and sort of support or dev support. So in my mind, DX is UX. And I wanted to know what your thoughts are in regards to that. So where I'm standing from, if you're a front-end person and you're concerned with UX, the same kind of thoughts would translate over to DX because this time your user is a developer. And I want to know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it sets us up nicely to also explore how AI can change this. Thank you, Fatima, for the question. And again, just to echo my friend, Kenny, just if you have questions, drop them in the chat or raise your hand. Actually, I would prefer if you raise your hand and actually talk to me like a human being. The question about UX and DX is a good one. And absolutely, I think, some would say, those who write a lot of code, they would compare JavaScript and TypeScript. They would say JavaScript is a subset of TypeScript, or TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. And superset meaning it's JavaScript plus plus. UX is, as we know, it's the experience of a user. Like, for example, we're all on Google Meet, and there's the mute button, the video button, all of this. A superset of UX could be DX, where it's the basic user experience plus extra affordances for developers. That's in the case that I think that's actually more true than DX is UX, because UX applies to everybody, including my mother. But my mother's not a developer, so DX doesn't apply to her, but UX does. Does that make sense? So UX is sort of universal, and DX is a superset of that. It's like the universal principles of UX plus a little bit more. How does AI tie into this? And so I think that's I hope that's clear. So for example, if we're talking about like a database, the UX of the database is, do I have to write SQL, or can I click and drag like a table, like a spreadsheet style UI? That's a UX question. But a DX question is, okay, what SDKs do you have available? What TypeScript or Java or Rust clients do you have available? Do you have HTTP2 compatible? All of that is DX. And so the UX is more like for any user, and the DX is what APIs do you have specifically for developers? So it is UX plus specific for developers. About the topic of AI. So I had a long conversation, like 2-hour conversation with Kent C. Dodds yesterday. And this will be a podcast episode shipping this Monday. Thank you, Fatima, for listening to the podcast. I don't mind that you do it while you're working out. And it's a very deep dive on, basically, like, we start by me asking Kent, like, you're a React guy. Why are you doing AI? You've been so active in React. Why AI? Why did you switch? Is it just because you're chasing hype? And he said, No, it's because I don't like React is just an implementation detail of UX. And Kent said I care about UX the most, and AI is changing UX. Okay, so you might be asking, how is it doing that? Well, if we think about just UX, what is the UX of a website or a web app? Like Google Meet, we come on Google Meet and we look at all these buttons and we click on them, but this is fundamentally just a web page, and the web page is UX. Does that make sense? With AI, we don't need web pages anymore to have UX, right? You can just like type text in natural language to ChatGPT and it will do the work for you. It will respond to you. Similar, if you use a voice interface, you don't even need a screen. Imagine you don't even need a screen, you just need a microphone, and you just say things. Make me an app that can track my fitness. You say this with your mouth. Make me an app that can track my fitness, and a fitness app, that's a UX thing, right? You could even say, I just ate jollof rice and stew. And you can just say that, and your fitness application will make a note of that. So the interface is no longer a screen and a website. It's just voice or text. And so UX shifts with AI. UX is no longer React dependent. UX can be voice dependent and so on. So now if we tie it back to DevRel, developer experience, that's the intersection. Is if you're trying to create good DX, which is an evolution of UX, you need to meet developers where they are. Where are developers? Are developers coding with voice? Not yet, right? But are developers coding with tools like V0, Lovable, Cursor? Yes. And so it's very important to get on these tools. I don't know if you have experience with these tools. If you don't, I highly recommend just download Cursor. It's free, and you can use that just to understand the whole movement of vibe coding, and that's where developers are. So if you want to create great DX at the intersection of AI, you would look into vibe coding or Bolt or V0. Okay, there's more I can say here. The developers are also taking advantage of a new protocol called MCP, or Model Context Protocol. Leave an emoji reaction if you know what this is, or if you heard it on my podcast. But MCP, or Model Context Protocol, is a standard server-client protocol where AI applications can do more than just talk. They can actually take actions. Developers are there. And Fatima, your question about UI and UX and DX, this is fundamentally different. The DX is here's an example. I created a model context protocol server for my database. And I'll show you a demo if you want. I'll open it up in a minute. But my company where I work, we make a database. And you talk about the UX of the database. Okay, there's a web UI. And you can like look at a spreadsheet and look at all your rows and columns and all your data. Okay, what's the UX of finding the highest performing employee in my employee database? Well, I click here and I click on employees and then I filter or I sort or I do something in the user interface. What's the DX of this? Well, I use the TypeScript client, or I write SQL or a similar language, and I say select from employees where deals closed is greater than 100, something like this. I write SQL. What's the new DX influenced by AI? That's the question. And the new DX influenced by AI doesn't require a graphical user interface anymore. It doesn't require like some React app. But over Model Context Protocol, I can just talk to Cursor or Claude or ChatGPT, and I can just say, get me the top performing employees in my company. That's it. I either say this with my mouth or I type a prompt. I say, get me the top performing employees, and it, over Model Context Protocol, will go talk to my database. It will construct the SQL query itself, the SQL query. It will automatically do the query, and it will give me back the data. Now, this is very powerful because I said, get me back the highest performing employees. What does that mean? Does it mean salespeople who close the most deals? Does it mean engineers who wrote the most code, shipped the most features? Who knows? What is highest performing? So the AI model will guess, and then it will get me the data. Or if it won't guess, it will just ask me in plain language, like, hey, what do you mean by highest performing? And then I just say it. I say, oh no, I mean the engineers who wrote the most code. And then it will get me back that. I'm not clicking on a screen anymore. Does this make sense? I'm not doing React. There is no user interface the way we think of user interfaces. The interface is now either my voice or my text. And this is where developers are with MCP. And this is how we do DevRel at the intersection of AI and UI to create DX, which is a superset of UX, but this is like the future DX. Yeah, this is where it's going. I'll finish with this and then I'll take more questions. Again, your reminder to put questions in the chat or raise your hand. Kent Dodds, I don't know if I fully agree with this, but Kent C. Dodds said yesterday, and he'll say on Monday on the podcast, there's not going to be any more websites. Like the web just doesn't matter. We're not going to go on like type like, go to google.com or go to like flights.google.com to book tickets or no. He says the MCP is the future, where we do everything through AI assistants. You just give it a prompt, and over model context protocol, the AI assistant goes browse the web, does whatever. Like we don't do that. That's old school nowadays. And so if that's the case, then MCP is the way. In fact, if you're scared of AI taking your job or something like this, then it's really good to invest time in learning about model context protocol and implementing some MCP servers yourself. Okay, so I hope, Fatima, that answers your question in a good amount of detail. I'm happy to take more questions either in the chat or raise your hand.
Yes, that answers my question. Thank you so much.
Great. Adatola says, where do you see the biggest opportunities for DevRel in AI tooling, infra, or open source, etc.? It's a good question. I think actually tooling. And let me elaborate on this, because so many people got jobs at Meta early in the early React days by creating like random open source stuff in the React ecosystem. And then Meta, even me, like I interviewed with Meta a lot because I just was really active in the React ecosystem, making random stuff. Thank you, Kenny. And so that's I think the biggest opportunities in DevRel and AI is just go make MCP servers. For example, there is no Gmail MCP server. That would be super useful. Can you imagine, like you go to ChatGPT, you're like, hey, what are my emails today? You just say that, and it's like, here's your emails. What? Crazy. And then you say, okay, but which emails are urgent? And then it will just tell you, or which emails should I ignore? What should I, like, you just talk, man. You don't need any. And so make a Gmail MCP server, make it open source, and that should give you some leverage in an interview with Google to get a job at Google. You know what I mean? So that's the pathway. And that's why I say that's the biggest opportunities. Of course, Google should make their own Gmail MCP server. They're a big company. That means they don't do anything. That means there's a lot of people pretending. There's a lot of busy bees buzzing, but there's no honey. Big companies are like this. They just like do a lot of useless work and then nothing happens. And so this is your great opportunity in DevRel. Create a great MCP server in really any product, and this should get you some opportunities. Abimbola, what's up?
Hello, can you hear me? I just want to confirm.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Good afternoon from here. I want to ask about two different questions, but I'll just keep it very. So, the first question is, I just want to understand your personal, your background in DevRel. How much of a coder were you? How much of a developer were you? When did you transition into DevRel? Then also in DevRel, what was your, how do I put it? Your transition in DevRel, I'm very sure you didn't start with AI. So where did you start with? Where are you currently? Then also my second question, for someone that wants to go into AI like you advised, for someone that wants to go into it, what are the necessary knowledge skill that is meant to have to go into it? So.
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me answer your second question first, because it's, I think, more applicable to everybody. Yeah, what skills are important to go into DevRel and AI DevRel? I think the most important skill is communication. Without a shadow of doubt, you have to be an excellent communicator. I studied communication. And it pays massive dividends, like enormous. You can't imagine the value of life, how life gets better when you're an excellent communicator. It's like, many of you are African, so you'll maybe understand this. When you have huge muscles, like when you're a strong person physically, life's just easier, right? Like you can just do stuff. When you're an excellent communicator, it's exactly that, but mental and relational. Like you unlock a superpower, and the superpower takes you so extremely far in your career. Nobody tell me by reacting and with emoji reactions if you've heard this before. Thumbs up, thumbs down, and thumbs down if you've never heard this before. But like, I cannot understate the value of communication. It is the most valuable skill, period, that you need. And I don't just mean like be a decent communicator. This communication, the worst communication, is communication that is full of shit. Can I swear here? I don't, kick me if not. But like, has anyone been to San Francisco? Show me a hand emoji if you have. San Francisco is, what a place. There's so much bullshit. So much, it's unbelievable. Like there's many people who want to be Steve Jobs, who Steve Jobs himself didn't really have a lot of technical knowledge, but he could communicate very well. And there's a lot of people who want to be like that, who are building a lot of things, mostly castles in the air, but they talk with confidence, you know, and the problem is they don't have the knowledge to back up what they're saying. And so when I say be an excellent communicator, I mean speak well, but also know deeply that what you're speaking of. And this combination of like knowledge plus the ability to deliver that knowledge, wow, that you will go very, very far. You will be some CEO or something. I think that's so extremely important. In fact, some would say Steve Jobs didn't have a lot of technical knowledge, and he didn't, but he had a lot of knowledge about the business area. And you can see that in his presentations, right? And so I think, yeah, to answer your question, Abimbola, that like the skill is knowledge and communication. Knowledge isn't really a skill. You can go get knowledge from wherever you want, but communication is so unbelievably important. And the crazy thing is everyone learns this differently. So you've got to learn what's the best way for you personally to communicate with your style, with your personality. Some communicators that I look up to that I actually used in my case studies when I studied communication was, of course, the great Steve Jobs, but also Barack Obama, I think, is probably one of the greatest communicators of all time. And President Bill Clinton was just a really great communicator as well. So Abhishek is asking, what's my advice to improve our communication? You can accomplish anything. You should like maybe write this down or so. This is so important what I'm about to say. You can accomplish literally anything with enough attention and intention and effort. Those are the secret ingredients for like accomplishing literally anything. Attention, intention, and effort. Attention, intent. So what does that mean? Well, if you want to be a better communicator, Abhishek, then pay attention. How often do you go through life? How often do you go through your day and you say a bunch of stuff, you communicate, but you're not paying attention to how you're communicating? You know, it's passive, unfortunately, for the most of us. So step one, pay attention to how you're communicating. Step two, have an intention. I want to communicate clearly. That's so important. So many of us communicate unintentionally, right? We see that. Like sometimes we have arguments and we maybe get angry and we yell at someone. And what do we say? We say, sorry, I wasn't thinking. You can also say, sorry, I was communicating without intent. I was passively communicating. I wasn't in the driver's seat of my communication. Does that make sense? And so attention, intention, and then effort, meaning put in actual effort to improve. That's really all it is. The specifics of it will depend on your personality. Some people really enjoy like watching hours and hours and hours of YouTube videos and embodying what they see. Like I see this, I emulate it. Others prefer reading books. Others prefer like having a physical person, like, hey, come with me, mentor me side by side every day, I'll pay you, right? So it really just depends. There's a great resource called Charisma on Command. It's a YouTube channel. I don't know if it's still going, but they have some great stuff where they look at celebrity interviews and dissect the sort of communication dynamics there. Charisma on Command. It's a pretty decent YouTube channel. I don't follow it, but I see some of the things they teach, and I think it's pretty decent. Hope that helps, Abhishek. Ngube, Precious. I'll just say Precious. Precious works as a community manager in an AI company. And your question is, where can we find developers who actually need and are actively using tools like these, tools specifically for building AI agents? That's a great question. Where can we find? But this is the heart of DevRel, right? Where can we find developers who need what we're building? This question, I think, highlights a problem in our industry where we often build solutions for problems nobody has. Because if somebody has the problem, then you will know them and you will know where they are. And so if you're wondering, hey, I have this great tool, but where are the developers for it? Maybe nobody wants it. And this is, I think, this discernment is very important with DevRel. I know a lot of companies that start and they think the founder thinks this is a great idea, but nobody wants it. And so they literally will hire people. They used to hire me to like manufacture interest for this when nobody was interested. I think your best bet here, Precious, is instead of like looking for where the developers are, just being as loud as possible. Just broadcast it far and wide. Hacker News, Medium, Dev2, X, Blue Sky, LinkedIn. Just this is available, this is available, this is available. They're just like constant. Here's a demo with this thing that nobody cares about here, and just keep going at it until someone sees it. I think if you combine that with paid ads and just cast a really wide net, then you'll catch maybe 3 fish. It could be that you're fishing in very empty waters, unfortunately. Like Cursor is a great example, or ChatGPT. These tools have millions of users, but that's just because the water had a lot of fish in it. Like people actually wanted it, right? GitHub Copilot was not good enough in VS Code, and so someone said, we're going to make Cursor. And there was already a market for it. GitHub Copilot proved it. They literally put fish in the water. Does that make sense? I hope that helps. Abdul Kawi is asking, what would you recommend as a pathway to learn about the key technical aspects of AI and LLMs aside basic prompting and vibe coding as a whole? That's a great question, Abdul Kawi. The pathway, the premier pathway, the best pathway to learn about AI in 2025 is the episode about AI in 2025 on my podcast. That's why I made it. And I'm not here like trying to like get subscribers or whatever. I honestly don't care if any of you subscribe or not, but it's just the best resource. And I created it because nothing like this existed. I had exactly the same question, Abdul Kavi, and I was looking around. I was looking, for example, my friend Francesco Chula, he may have been on here. He creates great content. James Q Quick, like all of these people create great content, but no one has created a pathway to learn about key technical aspects of AI. And so I made it. And so I can honestly say that podcast episode is the best one. And you can listen to it on Spotify or Apple also. It doesn't have to be YouTube, but really it covers everything. It's like an hour and a half, but after you get this, you will know for sure all the things you need to know about AI. Okay, great. I think that's all the questions. Oh, Simon Sinek is amazing and has great content around intentional leadership. Hey, thanks, Jordana. That's awesome. Yeah, TED has great talks about communication as well. I actually gave a TEDx talk once. You may find that if you're lucky. It was 13 years ago, so your mileage may vary. Great. I want to open it up for any more questions. If not, I can show you some stuff about. Okay, cool. Thanks, Jordana.
Thank you. Thank you for all of the information. I have a question where you can focus it onto AI, but in tech in general. What's one thing that you think is very interesting or you're most excited about that's going on now or is happening?
Yeah, I think what's going. Thank you for that question, Jordana. I think what's really exciting is, when the internet was new, there was a lot of fear and uncertainty and doubt. People literally said, I will never put my credit card into some website because you don't know. And then there were lots of scams, and there was lots of stealing, but also there was a lot of adaptation, positive adaptation, right? We created security protocols, we created TLS encryption, we created all this beautiful software that exists now, where people just buy stuff on the internet regularly. Like we don't even, like at least where I live in Germany, we don't even think about it anymore. Like it's just like, oh, you need this? Go on Amazon. Like nobody even goes to retail stores anymore. It's really bad. or maybe good, but we're in a similar stage with AI, right? Like now people literally will say, oh, I would never put my credit card into ChatGPT because so and so. It's the same. And we've come full circle, but not to the same vertical. We're like level up, but still the circle. Does it make sense? It's like a spiral staircase going up. And we're at the point in the timeline where the browser was just invented and there's like security issues. Or let's use another analogy, air travel. Yeah, like air travel in its infancy, commercial air travel was extremely dangerous, right? Like planes would just crash. And there was this one Pan Am Cathay Pacific case where like they collided with each other on the runway. Can you imagine how tragic, right? And so people used to be like, I will never fly with air travel and so on. Today, it's the safest way to travel on the planet. Like bicycles are like less safe than air travel. Walking on the street is less safe than an airplane. And so AI is unsafe. AI can hallucinate, but we're in this stage, we're in a very formative stage, and this excites me greatly because like the potential to build is enormous. It's absolutely enormous. You could be the person who creates a developer experience primitive that enables secure payments across all your across all your applications, period. Like right now, there is no answer. There's no answer. So MCP is an answer to allow AI applications to perform actions on your behalf. Like I said, like, hey, ChatGPT, book me a flight. I need to spend whatever. There is absolutely no standard for securely sharing your payment information with ChatGPT. It just doesn't exist. What does that mean if it doesn't exist? It means that each and every one of us in this call can build that. We could be that person. We could be a person that creates a revolutionary technology and changes the world. That's insane. That's where we are, and that excites me greatly. More practically, what excites me is all of the innovation around communication protocols with AI and otherwise. So we've talked a lot about model context protocol, but Google just released another protocol called A2A, or agent to agent, which they say is complementary to MCP. But if you look closely, it kind of rivals MCP. It's almost a competitor to MCP, and they say it's complementary. So I don't know what's going on there, but I know capitalism is involved, and that also excites me. Like let's watch this competition and see how, one, we can help it, but two, where opportunities are. I think I don't need to remind anyone about how much opportunity there was at the beginning of the internet. So like .com millionaires were a thing, right? Some guy decided, I want to make email, but with HTML, Hotmail. He just created Hotmail and became a billionaire. Mark Zuckerberg was like, bro, I want to connect with like all of this just happened because some guy wanted to build it. And AI is literally that early. And so that's what excites me. It's so early, and each and every one of us, there's like 32 people here. Literally everyone could be something extremely great and revolutionary. So that, I hope that answers your question, Jordana. There's just enormous potential. Ido is asking, do you see any issues if AI engineers don't have machine learning experience in the long run? No, I don't. I don't see any issues, but I see advantages to having machine learning experience, because again, just the more you know, the more capable you are, right? And so it's not going to limit you for sure, but if you know about machine learning, you're going to be able to go further. For example, I know about machine learning. I train my own models, and if, for example, I'm doing something and it gets too expensive, I just know immediately, okay, you know what, this is too expensive. I'm going to take an open source model, train it on my specific data. It's going to be a small model, and I'll host this, and it'll do the same work for like 1/10 of the cost. Like I can already do that because I know machine learning stuff. And so it gives you like extra abilities, but it's not going to like inhibit you, I don't think. Samuel is asking, what advice do you have for developers getting into the game in this era of AI? My advice is really just one word, and that is build. Just build, man. Build and build and build. We have just a few minutes left, and there's a question in the queue, but I want to share with you something that's extremely important. And this is that you can just do things. You can just, and I want to tell you a story because I think that's how we learn best. I have a family member who is just a complete loser, just an absolutely complete loser, who doesn't accomplish anything in his like in his life. Yeah, he's been building something for the past 30 years. Nothing has happened. I hope this is not live streamed, by the way, but nothing has happened. And like since I was 6 years old, hey, what are you building? Oh, I'm building this thing. 6 years old. When I was 15, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just building. 32 years old, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just building. Meanwhile, his wife has had to work extremely hard and support their family because the guy lives in a dreamland. And why am I telling you this? I spent a lot of time examining how someone can keep building something and never really go anywhere for 30 years. And the answer I found was there's just fear. That's what it's just fear of like, hey, what if I build it and then it doesn't work, right? And so what's the solution to this fear? Okay, I'll just never finish building it. And then I don't get to face that painful outcome of failing, and then my life is better, right? And so you just delay it infinitely. I think this is poison. And I think the antidote, fear of success or fear of failure, it's what if, and then it holds you back. I think the antidote to this is ship. You ship early, you ship often. You don't give a shit if anyone uses it or not. You are independent of the outcome, and you just get it done and you ship it. And if it works, great, you're a billionaire maybe. If it doesn't work, guess what? You're a creative human being with creative ability. You can just make another thing. You're an infinite idea factory. You can just build things. And that's my advice to you. You asked for what advice, Samuel? You said, what advice do you have for developers getting into the game? Get over your fear and just build and ship. Do not stop. Do not delay. Ship something unfinished. Nobody cares. Take inspiration from Peter Levels or Levels.io. He ships like random bullshit that doesn't even look good, but gets him literally $40,000-$50,000 a month, right? Monetize early, build and ship, because that's the name of the game. Of course, people are going to hate it. People hate everything. People are ridiculous. Like everyone hates me for like random. Who cares? I just want to build, and I think that's the best advice for you. All right. There's more questions. What advice? Oh no, that was, I answered that one. Do you think any fallback should exist if the action taken by the agent is not up to mark? Yes, you as a developer should model that fallback. There's another question. Are AI generated code secure? The answer is absolutely not. Use Snyk, SNYK. It's an extension that will highlight insecure code, and you'll find that the majority of code generated by AI is bad. And I expect you to be like, this is also a requirement for being a DevRel engineer. You have to know the truth so that you can silence the lies. And again, that comes again with the skill set of communication and knowledge. So I think we're at time. Abdul Kawi has one question. You had your hand up for a while. Abdul Kawi, I'll let you ask your question and then we'll wrap up.
Yes, thank you so much. This is actually like my favorite space so far. I like how articulate you are. So my question is, it might sound cliche, but like, I wanted to ask, obviously you're a very good developer. How have you been able to manage the whole technical aspect and the non-technical aspect? Because I work as a community manager, right? And I realized that almost through last year, I didn't code as much. Like my technical aspects was lagging behind way too much. So, and this year I tried to pick it up and realized that my community aspect is almost dead. So like, how have you been able to pair up the two with creating content, the podcast and every other thing basically?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And my answer is, what you do is you build and then you share. Another way of putting this is, so there's a developer advocate at Twilio, formerly I think named Tilde Thurium, who has this analogy of carving the turkey. So Americans for Thanksgiving, they celebrate killing a lot of people by cooking a big bird, a turkey, and they carve it, meaning they cut it into pieces after they cook it, ideally. And a huge bird like a turkey, you can carve into many small pieces. And this is the analogy that Tilly has, which is you create a turkey and then you carve it. Okay, what does creating a turkey mean? You use your technical ability to create something. If you're a community manager, I assume it's for a software tool. That's what DevRel is. And so if you're working on like a database, make an application that uses the database. That's your turkey, right? And so that's your technical ability. You're using it well, you're optimizing it, you're making it fast. Build something. That's your turkey. And then you carve it by showing it to the community in various modalities, like blog posts, videos, maybe shorts, reels, Discord Q&As, mentorship sessions, whatever it may be. And that's how I typically balance. I will build something and then carve the turkey through content. And this helps kind of both sides. I hope that's helpful. I think we're at the end, so I do want to respect the time of the organizers here. I'll hand it back to Kenny or the host.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tejas. You touched on relationship at the beginning and how that is important for developer relations because it's, developer relations. And I know you have very strong opinions on how that relationship is formed. Because some people sometimes want to do it to grow their network or to maybe get some kind of favor from someone. And I don't think that's the right way to go about it, right? And I want you to, just before you go, to kind of like talk about that a little bit more. I feel like that's an important part of why we're here, is how to be able to form meaningful relationships the right way, especially as in the professional side of things. Because you and I are friends. I didn't meet you trying to get a favor from you. And, and by the way, if you don't know this is Tejas he always comes to this session to help, DevRels. And all I have to do is I just send him a DM like, hey, can you come? And it's like, yeah, So I want to kind of like maybe get you to talk a little bit more about how early stage developer advocates can think about relationships in that way as opposed to, getting favors from people.
Yeah. I might do something crazy to answer your question. Which a lot of people will frown upon, but who cares? This will probably go very, very. I don't know. We'll see how it goes because we're told not to mix these things that I'm about to talk about. But I am a person who believes the Bible. Okay, and I go with me on that. You don't have to. I'm not trying to convert anyone or whatever. But there's a story where there's this fisherman who is like struggling. His family's about to starve. He's like, I can't catch any fish. And that's how they used to eat like thousands of years ago. And so he's struggling. And then you have this dude, Jesus, who shows up and he's like, bro, like put your nets somewhere there. Right. And he's like, he does it. He has no reason to believe this guy. Anyway, he does it. And he's like, whoa. And he caught like 1 million fish or something. And he says to him, Jesus does, he says, that's cool. You caught a bunch of fish, but if you follow me for a while, I'll show you how not to catch fish, but how to catch people, how to build relationships. And I was like, whoa. And so you continue to look at the life of this person, whether you believe, whether you're religious, whether you're not, I don't really care whether you believe in this or not. It's secondary. The point is, this is a historical figure that lived and was like the master of building meaningful relationships. No question. There is no disagreement about that across religious borders. So like across Islam, I've studied Islam. I grew up in Qatar, actually. Across Islam or Christianity or Judaism or even Buddhism or Hindu, like this person was just a master at creating great relationships. And so I take a lot of inspiration from him. And what does he say? Well, he says, hey, first of all, love God and your neighbor as yourself. Like just genuinely start there. Just love people. You don't want anything from them. You don't value them based on how much money they bring or what they're going to do for you. You look at them and you go like, yo, that's a human being and they have a story and they come from somewhere and they're gonna die one day, but while they're alive, they're gonna have struggles. They're gonna have to put food on the table. And so you start from there, right? Like it's not just like a feeling of like, oh yes, I feel love for them because it's like, no, I'm invested in them. Like I want to tell me your name. Where do you work? What do you do? Is your job hard? Can I make it easier? Hey, I have a developer tool that will actually make your job easier. This is the journey of DevRel. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, your job sucks. I'm solving that problem in my job. Let me show you, right? It starts from there. It starts from like see people as opportunities or leverage. You see them as people, and you try and make their life easier. There was a question earlier about this where you were talking about this product. You're like, where do I find developers? Here it was by Precious. My question is, where can we find developers who actually need and are actively using tools like these? I don't know, but when you find them, it's going to matter a lot how you give them your tool, right? You could be like, hey, I don't have time to talk to you, but here's a tool, goodbye. That's not going to do what you want it to. That's not going to give them what they need. But if you see them as a human being struggling with the tool that you offer, the tool that makes agents easy, and you just see them as a human being and you engage with them as a human being, some would say if you love your neighbor as yourself, then they're more likely to actually feel like a human being and care about your product. I hope that helps. Another way of building great relationships is literally everything Jesus has said, just reading it and putting it into practice. For example, if you see someone struggling and you can help them, then help them. Don't think you're better than them. Don't think I'm, and so I think that's really it, is like looking people in the eye, seeing them at face value, and prioritizing their humanity and their identity over their money or their opportunity.
Thank you so much. I wanted to emphasize that because I think we've kind of talked about it a couple of times on the on these sessions, and I wanted someone else to kind of like shed some light on that. So thank you so much, Tejas, for coming through. We'll probably ping you again for the next cohort when the time comes. You can probably hop off now so we can stop taking all of your time and we can continue our conversations.
Thank you for joining my discussion on DevRel. As mentioned, all of the resources and materials I used to prepare for this are linked in the show notes below. If you're learning from and or enjoying this content, then a great way to support it is to share this on social media. Clip it, or maybe your favorite portions. If you have comments, share them on social media. That's a great way to help. If you're listening on YouTube or watching on YouTube, then if you like the video and subscribe to the channel, that's also a great way with no cost to you that you can support. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, and if you leave a review for the podcast, anything up to 5 stars that you think it deserves would also help the algorithm surface it and help people know that it exists. Ultimately, all of this knowledge is free and is shared because I want people to know and listen and grow from it. So you can play a part in that as well. For now, I want to thank you so much for joining this episode. Thank you for being a part of this podcast. And most importantly, thank you for your interest in engineering and DevRel.